As she pulled the door closed behind her, she called back, "Bye, Mom. Love you." Those were the last words Elena Ellison would ever hear from her daughter. She was frantic, repeating over and over, "He tried to rape me. He tried to rape me. Do you see these scratches?" As she lifted her shorts to show the angry red marks on her inner thigh. Then came the call from the press officer asking if I had heard about a second girl who had gone missing in Oregon City. It felt as though the earth had opened beneath us. They were simply gone, as if both girls had vanished into thin air. Oregon City, Oregon, lies just southeast of Portland, near the scenic Willamette Falls. With roughly 28,000 residents, it is a quiet community. But for nearly a year, one individual would hold the entire city in a grip of fear, testing the FBI and local law enforcement in ways they had never experienced before. One ordinary morning at the Newell Creek Village apartment complex, children made their way to the bus stop for school. 12-year-old Ava Ellison was not among them. She had been running a little late. As she pulled the door closed behind her, she called back, "Bye, Mom. Love you." That was the last time Elena Ellison spoke to her daughter. When Ava had not returned by nightfall, her mother began to worry. She pulled out the phone numbers for all of Ava's friends and started making calls, asking if anyone had seen her daughter or if she had been at school. No one had seen or heard from Ava all day. Elena's next call was to her daughter's dance instructor, Chandra Bowen, who was also a family friend. They had been preparing for an upcoming competition and were practicing every night after school. Elena asked if Chandra had seen Ava or if she had come to practice. Chandra said no, she had not seen her. She asked the other girls in the office if they had seen Ava, and they confirmed she had not been at school. It now appeared that somewhere on the short walk from her front door to the bus stop, in broad daylight, Ava Ellison had simply vanished. Growing more desperate with every passing moment, Elena finally broke down and called 911. The dispatcher asked for her location and the nature of the emergency. Elena explained that her 12-year-old daughter was missing. The dispatcher asked if she thought Ava might have run away. Elena said no. She explained that her daughter would have called to let her know if she was going to be late. She would never have left without saying something. When you have a troubled 12-year-old girl, there are many possibilities. Most likely, she is safe with friends or another relative. As police officers, we take so many runaway reports, and more than 99% of the time the child is safe. But Elena remained unconvinced. Her daughter had not taken anything unusual with her. No extra clothes, no makeup. Those were things a girl almost 13 would almost certainly pack if she were leaving on her own. Nothing out of the ordinary was missing from her room. Police were skeptical at first, but because of Ava's young age, they pursued the case. One thing they knew, if she had in fact been abducted, the likelihood of finding her alive was diminishing rapidly. If they are not found within the first few hours, especially the first 24, that changes everything. It is critical that they are located quickly. As a first step, police interviewed Elena and her current boyfriend, Derek Kitely. Both seemed helpful and genuinely concerned. But when Elena was asked if she knew anyone who might want to harm her daughter, she told investigators that Ava and her biological father, Wesley Granger, had a tumultuous relationship. One of the early rumors investigators heard was that Ava's father had been convicted of molesting her. The charges were reduced to one count of attempted sexual molestation when he pleaded no contest. He was sentenced to 11 months probation and was a registered sex offender with restricted contact with his family. There were reports that he had been very upset about the situation and had actually threatened Ava's life. Adding to suspicions was the fact that at the time of Ava's disappearance, Wesley Granger was living less than 20 miles away. One of the first people investigators set out to find was him, to ask if the threats were true. He lived in a trailer park. As the detective started walking toward the trailer, Wesley ran out the back door. Police eventually tracked him down, but when his alibi checked out, he was dropped as a person of interest. This is routine in these kinds of cases. Identify people in close proximity to the victim, whether family or neighbors, and rule them out so the investigation can move forward productively. Elena also told police about Victor Harlan, a 38-year-old single father who lived up the street near the bus stop. His daughter, Mallory, was a friend of Ava's. Victor's house had been the hangout place where kids went to get away from problems at home. Like Ava's father, Victor provided police with an alibi. He was cooperative and said he had been at work that morning. Records appeared to confirm it. In the days that followed, investigators canvassed the area around the apartment complex, looking for anything that might shed light on Ava's disappearance. They were getting conflicting stories. Some people thought they might have seen her. Others were not sure. 24 hours passed, then 48, then 72. When 9 days had gone by with still no sign of Ava, parents all over the city began to take notice. There was a tremendous amount of fear, especially for parents with adolescent children. People kept thinking, I hope my child is not next. Everybody was shaken. Because so much time had passed with no verifiable sighting, authorities decided this might be more than a simple runaway case. That was when they called for assistance from the FBI. The Portland field office moved quickly. We come into a case assuming it has been a child abduction, because if you do not start off that way, you are already behind. But like local authorities, the agents hit the ground with very little to go on. With no crime scene, no positive sightings, and no suggestion that anything bad had happened to Ava, it was difficult to find a starting point. They conducted searches, did neighborhood canvasses, and interviewed many people. As soon as she stepped out her front door, no one could say what had happened to her. With each passing day, things grew bleaker for the family. It was like a roller coaster. You try to think positive, but horrible thoughts keep creeping in, and you push them away. 2 months went by with no break in the case. Then came the call to the FBI office in Portland that stopped everything. I was driving home after dinner with my wife when the press officer called and asked if I had heard about a second girl who had gone missing in Oregon City. The mother of the second girl reported that her 13-year-old daughter, Mia Garrison, had left for the bus that morning and never arrived at school. No one had seen her. The address she gave was the same apartment complex where Ava Ellison had lived. Federal and local authorities had been investigating Ava's disappearance for 2 months, with no success. When Mia Garrison vanished under almost identical circumstances, authorities and residents alike were shaken to the core. I remained out there that evening with 2 agents, trying to gather information from family members and anyone who might have seen Mia that day. It became clear we had a serious problem at this complex. For Mariah Garrison, the discovery was a double blow. A close friend of Ava's, the past 2 months had already been an emotional roller coaster. Now her own sister had vanished as well. She received a call from her mother saying Mia had not shown up for school or dance practice. That gave her a terrible feeling that something was wrong. She broke down crying. It felt as though the earth had opened up. They were both simply gone, as if they had disappeared into thin air. I was already in a panic inside. It had to be the same person. The same person who took my daughter had now taken Mia. Investigators could not ignore the eerie similarities. Both girls lived in the same housing complex, and both had vanished on their way to school in broad daylight. When Mia disappeared, we knew we were dealing with a predator. We took steps to try to prevent anything else from happening by maintaining a presence in the area every day. We used other investigative techniques as preventative measures in case something else occurred in that neighborhood. Investigators' next step was to piece together a timeline of events leading up to Mia's disappearance. Information was limited. The only thing Mariah could clearly remember about that morning was that she and Mia had argued. The last conversation they had was about borrowing a sweater. It was not a good conversation. They ended up in a huge fight, cussing each other out. Mariah slammed the door. It was very confusing and very hard, not having her there. With the clock ticking, authorities established a command center in the local firehouse to speed the flow of information. Because both girls lived in the same apartment complex, investigators renewed their search of the area. It was not an easy task. The complex sits down a hill, surrounded by heavily wooded terrain and a canyon behind it. There were many escape routes that would be difficult to follow because of the uneven, wet, muddy ground, especially during the rainy season. For Ava's mother, all the searching only deepened her worst fears. She did not go on any of the searches. She was afraid she might find her daughter no longer alive, and that was the last thing she wanted, to come upon her daughter's body. The hope is always that you will find the girls alive. But there is a part of us as law enforcement officers that realizes, as the days go on, our chances of finding them alive are not good. While canine units searched the woods and fields, investigators studied the girls' histories, what is called victimology. Once again, similarities were hard to ignore. Like Ava's father, Mia's father had also had trouble with the law. He had gone to jail on a sex offense. This was not typical family behavior. Jason Richard Gaddis had been found guilty of sex crimes against a minor years earlier and had served time. He was living nearby when Ava disappeared and was in jail when his own daughter went missing. After a thorough investigation, authorities found no evidence linking him to either case. He was simply one of many potentially dangerous people who had access to these children. While he was eventually cleared, police had no shortage of possible persons of interest. The person of interest board was a whiteboard that kept changing. It was a long and ever-revolving list. The girls had lived near each other and both had vanished with little evidence of a struggle. Those clues suggested to police they were likely abducted by someone they knew, a neighbor, a relative, or a friend. Investigators had looked into one resident's past because he had an open-door policy, and both girls came from troubled backgrounds. They assumed he might have taken them and hidden them somewhere. That was difficult to deal with. Whenever a tip came in, they followed up on anything they could. They left no stone unturned. They were receiving hundreds of tips a month. But as the list of suspects grew, investigators began to notice an unusual and disturbing pattern. The apartment complex was filled with people who had criminal histories, people who had fantasized about young girls. There were also a surprising number of registered sex offenders living in the area around the complex. It was what investigators call a suspect-rich environment. One agent came up to me and said he had interviewed 23 people in that complex that day and could not eliminate any of them as a suspect. The FBI's Child Abduction and Serial Murder Investigative Resources Center was formed to assist authorities investigating child abductions and homicides across the country. When Ava first vanished, police considered she might be a runaway, but Mia's disappearance 2 months later alerted everyone to an ominous reality. There was likely a predator in their midst, and he was targeting young girls. We have seen children returned years, even decades, after they have gone missing. For those who work these cases every day, hope never diminishes, even when frustration sets in. At their makeshift command center, the FBI and local police began the daunting task of processing thousands of leads. We kept thinking there had to be people here we were missing, somebody we had not yet been able to contact. Investigators soon focused on another person of interest, a man named Jonas Vegar. He was a single father in the apartment complex. His daughter was very young. He had asked to take Ava and Mia to a party spot before the girls went missing. He had a record for sexual assault and happened to be out of town when both girls disappeared. Police saw him as a red flag. They questioned him, but though he was defensive, they could not find evidence linking him to the missing girls. It made him furious and deeply upset. It is hard to imagine being told you are a suspect, but investigators have to rule people out. It was not long before investigators were looking closely at another pair of suspects. They had identified a couple in the complex who had said curious things about the girls' disappearances. Surveillance showed them attempting to grab someone off the street in a manner that appeared suspicious. Because they were under close observation, agents were able to intervene before anything happened. That behavior made them persons of interest. They asked for permission to search the apartment to make sure nothing inside would be useful to the investigation. They found nothing to suggest involvement in either girl's disappearance. Many people willingly gave consent for searches. Some, for various reasons, did not. On occasion, investigators obtained search warrants, but none of those searches proved fruitful. Keeping the scrutiny intense was important. You have to put a little pressure on people to share information. Not everyone is forthcoming when speaking with detectives and FBI agents. Some residents seemed more comfortable speaking to the press. One resident called reporter Evan Kessler with a tip about a dominatrix named Sheila Langford, who was living in the same apartment complex. He thought she could have attracted dangerous people to the area who might have harmed children after visiting her. When he located her, she was no longer living in Oregon City. She admitted she was a dominatrix, but said she entertained all her clients at a location in downtown Portland, far from the apartment complex. The lead turned out to be another dead end. The challenges in this case were too numerous to count. When you have no first-hand witness to an actual abduction, no known crime scene, and two missing young girls whose fate you do not know, you could be working a homicide without knowing it. You hope they are still alive and safe. It is a difficult kind of case when you really do not know what you have. Every time a new lead or suspect emerges, the critical clock starts again. There is common sense, there are statistics, but there is always hope. As police and the press continued tracking persons of interest, many community residents decided to take action themselves. Residents like Billy Thornton stepped up early to help organize searches in the wooded area around the apartment complex, looking for any evidence of the girls. He started a nonprofit and raised money for the effort. But his interest in the case soon raised eyebrows. While leading a search crew, they found what appeared to be a human skull in the woods near the complex. It did not belong to either of the girls. Billy Thornton's familiarity with both families also drew investigators' attention. It is far more likely for a child to be abducted by someone in the family circle than by a total stranger. These things do happen, but they are in the minority. Police and the FBI looked into his background once he came forward. They found nothing indicating a criminal history of that kind, though he struck some as an odd duck. Eventually, he took a polygraph test and was eliminated as a person of interest. It was not long before an earlier suspect resurfaced in investigators' minds. Victor Harlan had been the older man whose house was the hangout place. He was nice, but at times he was creepy. Little things like watching the girls brush their hair or walk into a bedroom or bathroom. Weeks after the disappearances, police focused again on Victor Harlan. Although his alibi had appeared to check out early on, his recent behavior was sending shockwaves through the community. When a reporter asked to talk to him about the two missing girls, he said, "Can I tell you something off the record?" When the reporter agreed, he said, "I'm the FBI's prime suspect." Just like that. That caught many people off guard. Then he began giving interviews to the media and seemed to get wrapped up in the attention. When somebody does that, it may mean they protest too much and should be considered more carefully. In their own way, they are saying, "Look at me, but I cannot say I did it." We thought he was trying to make it all about himself. We re-interviewed him and asked him to take a polygraph examination, as we did with a number of people during the investigation. He agreed, but did not do well on it. Victor Harlan also fit another piece of the FBI profile. His daughter, Mallory, was friends with both girls. His house had been the place kids went to get away from problems at home. He used to drive them to youth group and to Dairy Queen. He would take them to school if they missed the bus. He seemed like a nice person in general. Both girls' families were acquainted with him and friendly with him. Ava had actually stayed at his house for a period one summer. Of most interest to investigators now was the disclosure that Ava had accused Victor Harlan of molesting her just months before she disappeared. She had been frantic, saying, "He tried to rape me. He tried to rape me. Do you see these scratches?" As she showed the marks on her inner thigh, a couple of her nails were broken off. Having Victor be such a good guy and always friendly, like a father figure, made it hard to believe. If a child claims to be raped, more often than not, that child is telling the truth. A good investigator will get to the bottom of it. Unfortunately, sometimes children fantasize or are led by adults to say certain things. At the time, Elena believed her daughter, but police lacked hard evidence and did not pursue the case further. Elena had told them to look at Victor Harlan. He had motive and reason. When people talked to him, he seemed like an ordinary, average man from Oregon City, a single dad raising his young daughter. He had been cooperative and provided an alibi for the morning Ava disappeared, but everything pointed back to him. He had motive. He had opportunity. He could watch the girls. He knew what time they got to the bus stop every day. He really paid attention. I think he planned it. When confronted, Victor protested that he was being unjustly accused and that Ava had lied about him. The people who knew him, his friends and family, stood behind him. He also felt he was being persecuted because of his father's criminal past. His father had been convicted of 2 murders and was serving time on death row and was suspected in up to 20 other unsolved murders. In one of the murders he was convicted of, he had buried the victim in his own backyard. But the FBI cannot convict anyone based on a parent's crimes. At the command center, agents had to separate rumor and innuendo from fact. All those things about his background were significant and raised his level of suspicion, but they could not be used in a search warrant or in court. We knew he had a criminal history and that there had been some violence against women in his past. Yet Victor seemed undaunted by the police scrutiny. He did not run or hide. He opened his door to every reporter who came by. Investigators soon discovered a problem with his alibi. He claimed he had reported for work early that morning and had a time card to prove it. But the time card system was on the honor system. It was difficult to verify he had really been at work. There was also the matter of a newly poured concrete slab in his backyard. Just days after Ava's disappearance, Victor had sunk a series of barrels in his yard and covered them with dirt and cement. His explanation was that he had bought a hot tub and needed a concrete pad for support. Then, one afternoon, a strange incident occurred that raised more eyebrows. Mariah was spending the day with Mallory when the girls went inside to get popsicles from the freezer. Victor would not allow it. He did not give a reason why they had to go back outside. Mariah noticed he had added 4 extra padlocks to the freezer. It was wrapped with chains and took him 20 to 30 minutes to get the popsicles out. But with little more than circumstantial evidence, there was not much police could do. There was still no proof that any crime had even been committed. We do not know the fate of children who are missing. We do not know if they are dead, and if they are, whether it was at the hands of a family member or a stranger. Then everything changed when a frantic call came into the local 911 dispatcher. I was watching the news when they reported that a woman had come running out of Victor Harlan's house, naked. She ran into the middle of the street trying to flag down a car. After months of speculation, investigators finally caught a break in the case of the 2 Oregon City girls who had been missing since earlier that year. Out of the blue, their chief suspect was accused of raping his son's girlfriend. But there was more. The young woman told investigators she needed to tell everyone about what her boyfriend's father had done to those girls. She said she knew what he had done. He had kidnapped the girls, raped them, and killed them. My heart just dropped. All of us were stunned. Beyond any doubt, he had to be the one. Sharonda Bowen had been driving by Victor's home just minutes before the attack. She saw him standing by the car, waving as they drove past. Then, shortly after they got home, they saw on the news that he had raped the young woman. It was such a crazy thing for him to have done, and it showed clearly what he was capable of. Police arrested Victor Harlan for the rape of his son's girlfriend. A judge set bail at $1 million. There was a huge outcry that he was guilty, and that authorities should search the house and dig up the concrete pad in the backyard to learn the truth. Authorities conducted a full search of the property. I was dreading it, dreading what they might find. But at the same time, I needed to know. I would not have to wonder anymore. Search dogs were brought in, and it was not long before a backyard shed captured their attention. The dogs gave a strong alert and went directly to a large, heavy microwave oven box on the side of the shed. They gave a very strong indication. At that point, it felt as though the world had fallen out from under me. I was speechless. I had to go outside and sit with an FBI agent for several minutes to pull myself together before I could continue. Crime scene technicians examined the items in the shed, including the large box. Inside, they found the decomposing remains of a young female. I have discovered what appears to be human remains behind the house. The crowd reacted with shock. It was a visceral and emotional scene. Just outside town, investigators broke the news to family members. They told us they had found a body. We did not know whose at first. I remember watching the news and hearing the reporter say, "It was not good when the morgue truck arrived." Within 24 hours, the body was identified as Mia Garrison. It was one of those things you do not want to believe, because once you do, the reality sets in, and I did not want that. I wanted my sister back. Authorities turned their attention to the recently poured concrete slab in Victor's backyard. Using an industrial saw, they cut through the cement and discovered a series of 55-gallon drums filled with more concrete. One drum had a false top. Inside, they found the body of little Ava Ellison. Based on information from the medical examiner, we had a sense she may have been kept in a freezer for a period before being moved to the final burial spot. Just having spent so much time and energy on this case, and to have that bitter result, the things we saw that day are things that will stay with me for the rest of my life. The crime was so heinous and so disturbing. It was still shocking to know that an ordinary person was capable of that kind of violence, especially against such young, innocent lives. After she was found and we buried her, that was my time to grieve. That was my time to absorb what had actually taken place. You can imagine a million things that could have happened, but until you know for sure, it does not really sink in. And even then, I had trouble. They had put a fence around Victor's property. It was incredible to see the outpouring of support. The wall was solid with stuffed bears and flowers. I guess I'm kind of a cynic. I had seen those memorials on the news before, and always thought there was something phony about them. But I was in the area, so I went down and talked to the parents of the missing girls. They were treating these girls like their own children. They were using this as an example to teach their kids what the world is really like, and to pay tribute to these two young girls they had come to feel they knew. I do not look at those memorials the same way anymore. On the day of the verdict, Victor Harlan III was convicted of 17 charges, including aggravated murder, sexual abuse, rape, and abuse of a corpse. Sentencing was swift. For aggravated murder, he was sentenced to life in the Oregon Department of Corrections, without the possibility of parole. I'm glad he got life without parole, because he has every day of his life to think about what he did. He is definitely a predator. Do I think he would have done it again? Absolutely. He is right where he belongs. It was almost like he was two different people. The one we saw who was caring and supportive and wanted to be there for us, and the sick man who took two precious girls out of our lives. Despite his conviction, Victor Harlan has yet to reveal all the details about the murders of Ava Ellison and Mia Garrison. She is still in my heart. She is in everything I do. When I have really bad days, I come sit up here and light a candle and just talk to Mia and Ava as if they were still here. I am a mother bear. That is what I want to do. Protect my cubs. I always told her I would protect her, and I was not able to. That hurts.